Good morning. We have with us Mr. Maurits Van Tol, Chief Executive Catalyst Technologies, Johnson Matthey. Good morning, sir.
Good morning to you.
Uh, Good to see you at India Energy Week 2025. You, your company is doing a lot of work on sustainable technologies. So, as a technology expert and also the Chief Executive of Catalyst Technologies, how do you see these sustainable technologies and how do you see their profitability in the long term?
Yeah, I think what we need to realize first is that when you look at the oil and gas industry, had 120 years to bring it where it is today. Very high scale, large scale, very high efficiencies. So when you look at sustainable technologies, they're much earlier in their development. And that means that when you look from a cost perspective, of course, it's more expensive right now, but the cost curves, they go down when we bring this industry to scale. And I think that's why it's great to be here back in India again. We have a 60 years history in India with a lot of catalyst production, technology development and engineering in Mumbai and more than 1,000 employees in India, and we see that increase because India, of course, has so much to go after. When you look at clean tech, there is a lot of renewable power available, there's a lot of sunshine, it's a huge country, the land is available, a massive agricultural sector, and rather than stubble burning the agricultural waste, we have the technologies that can convert residual biomass in sustainable fuels, whether aviation fuel or gasoline, through methanol or direct via our FT cans technology, the Fischer-Tropsch technology. We are in the play of, we have two blue hydrogen technologies and a green hydrogen technology component manufacturing unit. So for us, really very important market. And then I didn't even mention yet e-methanol. And all of those technologies, they need biomass, cheap electricity, cheap low carbon hydrogen. And in that sense, India is situated very nicely. But we need to make sure that we bring these industries to scale as soon as possible. And India can do that because you have a large domestic use and you have, of course, export ambitions like your hydrogen vision of the country for exports of hydrogen as well, the 5 million tons that was mentioned. A lot of biomass that you can convert into fuels. So it's a journey. But you see countries all around the world realize that a lower carbon intensity production of chemicals and fuels is very important.
So, presently we haven't seen any large scale deployment of hydrogen in India. There have been a lot of announcements which have been made, but on the ground it seems to me that it will be either 2027 or 28 when we will see a large scale deployment or commissioning happening. So what's your feel since you take care of the entire global, so if you can focus on the global perspective and then connect it with India, with respect to all the technologies that you talked about.
Yeah, happy to do so. I think there are differences because, for example, let's take the UK. The UK has the government has said we plow in 21.7 billion pounds in helping an industry based on low carbon hydrogen and CO2 storage. The geology is excellent because there's empty oil and gas wells where you can store the CO2. The pipelines are there for carbon capture and storage. So in that sense, what you see is that developments in the UK go very rapidly, in particular in the blue hydrogen space. You see the same in the US. Again, pipeline infrastructure is there in many places and natural gas is very cheap. So of course also there you see blue develop in some other countries in Europe as well. You see it go fastest in areas where legislation is clearest. So like in the US, it's very clear how the subsidy regime works.
Okay.
In the EU, that's not clear. It's not in legislation yet. So there is more of a wait and see attitude at our customers to say, please provide us clarity in that respect before we do these massive investments in our plants. So it is different around the world, and that can be translated also. The situation to India, of course, is if you really want to become more independent from oil and gas imports, like India does, with your methanol strategy, where coal and renewables to methanol is going to be a big thing to replace 10% of the fossil use by 2030, then of course these mandates, some assistance, subsidies, some legislation, it will all help to bring an industry to scale. And you see it go fastest in countries, deployment of clean tech go fastest in countries where there is this clarity. So that's how the Indian government can also help bring this industry to scale very rapidly in India. And it's the same for hydrogen, sustainable aviation fuels. Yeah, mandates will help. And you see that countries with mandates on SAF, blending in of SAF components that are non-fossil based, there you see the development of technology, the deployment of technology go fastest. Yeah.
So presently the regulations are okay in India, or do you have some suggestions for making it better so that these technologies are adopted more from a pilot scale to a large scale in what we can say the fastest possible time frame that we are looking at?
So what you see is, what really helps is that you have a government with a vision. Whether it's on hydrogen, on methanol, that is where it starts, and then translated into an industrial policy, a mandates, a subsidy regime, and that is really very important. What you see is, for example, to bring hydrogen to scale in the US, the subsidies are pretty high. In comparison, the subsidies per kilo of hydrogen produced, low carbon intensity hydrogen produced in India, is pretty low. So the government should look a little bit, would be my recommendation, at the competitiveness of their support offering to the clean tech industry.
Sir, how do you see the role of hydrogen in global energy transition strategies and its potential for economic impact? Will the present price of $5, or will it go down to $1.5? As people are talking about?
Yeah, that's hard to say, but as what I said is, the price will go down. Why? Because we are very early on this maturization curve, the maturity curve for these technologies compared to the oil and gas industry, which had 100 years. So the price will go down. What is really important is, with the scale of the industry, what's really important is, of course, when you look at electrolytic hydrogen, that the price of that is determined by the price of renewable electricity. So if you can bring a renewable electricity industry to scale and make renewable electricity very cheap, that means you can produce low carbon hydrogen at very attractive prices, which means you can start to think about activating CO2 and make methanol out of it. And for methanol, you can feed the shipping industry as a fuel. It's a chemical building block. You can also make gasoline or SAF out of it. So in that sense, the price of renewable electricity is a very important component. For when you look at blue, of course there it starts with the price of methane, of the natural gas, which in the US is very attractive. The Henry Hub price is very low compared to what you pay in Europe, for example. So there are differences. And you need to look at your raw material position. So in India, I would say biomass, because there is so much residual biomass that you could put to good use, transfer into low carbon fuels, and renewable electricity because of the sunshine, maybe in some areas some wind, and the large amount of land available for solar parks and what have you. And then you can make the methanol that the country needs and wants, and the hydrogen that the country wants. And you can start to decarbonize also other industries. The direct reduction of iron ore, rather than with cokes, you can do it with hydrogen, etc., etc. So you start to build entire and decarbonize entire industries based on renewables. And of course India has a very good starting position there.
So, what are your insights into pathways for India to scale clean technology and cement its position as a leader in global decarbonization?
Yeah, I think it starts again with the raw material. Yeah, very advantageous position in biomass and in renewable electricity when you bring that to scale. So that is the starting position. And of course it is a huge country with a lot of talents, very good education system. So you have the talents here to design and build all those plants. That's why we have an engineering office in Mumbai as well, right? And that is a really important element for the success of an industry. You have a government who is very clear where they want to go with clean tech. So in that sense you have the support from the government. The other thing is you have very strong local players, yeah, like Reliance, India Oil, IOCL, what have you, many top companies that can pull this off. They know about large capital projects, how to design them, build them, operate them, bring them to scale, bring the cost down. So in that sense, there is nothing that would hold India back. It's really about, you know, making it happen and bringing an industry to scale. And when you do so, of course, the cost price of your materials will go down for further value adding activities in the country, but also to have a better export position. And then, in particular, for example, for exports into Europe, and I think also over time many other countries, when you look at these cross-border adjustment mechanisms for carbon intensity, countries that can make fuels, chemicals with a low carbon index, with a low carbon footprint, they have a competitive advantage on the global market. And again, there India, I think, has a very good chance to be a leader in certain areas for export, production for export.
So, what is your expected time frame for large projects to take off?
So I think
country?
When you make a decision now, before a large-scale operation is running, it's on average at least 4 years. So I think when you decide now, really large-scale plant operation, you're talking about 2029, 2030 and beyond. But at the end of the day, it's really important to realize that the technologies are ready. When you look at Johnson Matthey, we have our e-methanol technology, we have our FT cans, our Fischer-Tropsch technology for conversion of biomass or municipal solid waste into SAF or gasoline. The technologies are ready. ESNG is another one where you can produce synthetic natural gas from CO2 and renewables. The technologies are there for deployment at the right scale, at large scale. With the warranties of Johnson Matthey, we back our technologies obviously. And in that sense, a country and customers can move quickly with Johnson Matthey and make those decisions to embark on this journey. And we look forward to having those discussions, because we can start now with producing, preparing for the large-scale production of low carbon intensity production at large-scale products in India as well.
And how do you see, sir, EV versus hydrogen debate? Is EV just a pass-through for the hydrogen to come in future for mobility?
Yeah, it is a bit of a mix. It depends a little bit where you are. I think you need to have the infrastructure, the recharging infrastructure, and relatively low electricity prices that make EVs attractive. But of course, when you look at diesel engine replacements with fuel cells, then you think about buses, trains, and of course trucks, long distance transportation of goods, so that you need fewer of these refueling stations to begin with, because it takes time to have a blanket of refueling stations across the country. You're also here, Reliance and its partners are also working in India on these refueling stations, so that's really important. I think what you see also is internal combustion engines on hydrogen, because the purity requirements of the hydrogen are a little bit less than for fuel cells. So you can deploy hydrogen at large scale in internal combustion engines a bit earlier, and the infrastructure for the production of those engines is there, because it is like relatively minor modification to the current internal combustion engines. So that's another area where we see some countries really placing bets into that field. So it is for me not either or, it's and. I think it's also good that in a country you have inner city transportation, smaller cars, electrical vehicles make sense, fuel cells, long haul, internal combustion engines, running on hydrogen on the long haul as well. You can deploy that also on the short term, and it's end, I think.
Sir, you talked about biofuel, renewable energy, solar energy. What is the development on the electrolysis and fuel cell part? Because that is one area which also needs to cope up for a large scale deployment.
Yeah.
So where are we on that front globally?
So when you look at Johnson Matthey, we produce components for electrolyzers and for fuel cells, yeah, and we are ready to scale. So and also hyperscale. So we just opened a new plant in Royston. Yeah, it's another 5 gigawatt plant. We are ready to produce these catalyst coated membranes that you need for fuel cells and electrolyzers right now for large scale deployment all around the world. So I think in that sense we are ready, and I think also here in India, when you have of course a large scale generation of low cost electricity, renewable electricity, then of course it's one of the countries that can really think very quickly about large scale deployment of electrolyzers. Yeah? I think that is really something that India is looking into, and it should, because again, when you then have low cost, low carbon hydrogen, you can open up so many avenues for the chemical decarbonization of the chemical sector, other sectors, and the production of sustainable aviation fuels and other low carbon index fuels.
So for green hydrogen, do we need to transition to blue and then move to green hydrogen, or what's your comment on that?
It depends on which country.
So for India?
If you look at India, you have 7 times more natural gas reserves than in the UK, and the UK is betting big on blue, so you could do the same here. But there's also other applications for natural gas. If you look on the long run, you have so much sunshine here and so much opportunities to produce low cost electricity that I think over time, I think for India, green will probably be the biggest bet. But if you have some gas reserves that you would like to convert into hydrogen, large scale deployment of blue is possible now, the technology is ready, and you can start very quickly to help bring an industry to scale. And yeah, in that sense, it's again not either or for me. It depends very much on where you are with your raw material position.
Sir, you have 18 patents and 30 publications. So what's new that you are working on the technology front on sustainable technologies?
Yeah, for myself, that's a long time ago since I was a scientist. Yeah, but of course, when you look at Johnson Matthey, we do a lot of work in the field of catalysis and engineering. I think one of the things that is really helpful to know for India is, of course, the readiness of our Emerald technology, where we have developed very robust catalysts for the production of methanol from renewables. It's a catalyst that is really very robust. First of all, because renewable production can be fluctuating a bit over time. So you need a catalyst that can withstand changes in conditions. Also, there's quite a high water vapor pressure at high temperatures in such a system. And we have developed a catalyst that's also mechanically and thermomechanically very robust in those conditions. So we have a wonderful e-methanol technology. And of course, we have a very special Fischer-Tropsch technology. It's FT cans, where we have not only designed a very special catalyst for the conversion of synthesis gas into longer chain alkanes necessary for gasoline, synthetic gasoline, or synthetic aviation fuel. but also the way how we dose these catalysts in the reactor via kind of micro reactors, stacked micro reactors, which are very, very efficient, is also very unique and can help in India convert biomass at large scale into sustainable fuels, for example. So these are two examples of developments that we can deploy today that are very much suitable for the Indian market.
Globally, which country do you see will take a lead in green hydrogen?
In green hydrogen, you need low-cost electricity, so renewable electricity. So what you see is, of course, Middle East will have blue and green, a lot of sunshine, but also a lot of gas. You see Australia, big player in both, but of course a lot of potential for further large-scale generation of solar energy, for example. You see in South America also a combination of biomass and also renewables, so that they have a lot of, you will see a lot of green over time there as well. And blue is where you have like gas reserves and at low cost, and where you have the pipelines or can build the pipelines easily that can channel away the CO2 and put it underground. And so also the geological formations, empty gas and oil fields, that is where you see the deployment of blue. So it is countries that have green, also India will have a lot of green, and blue, like where you have a lot of gas, or the combination for countries that are blessed with both gas reserves and a lot of sunshine or wind power.
What about China, sir?
China is of course a lot in green, absolutely. They really deploy solar and wind at very large scale, very rapidly, and produce a lot of renewable electricity that way. Yeah.
So the fight is between Australia, India, China.
Yeah,
for the leadership position.
And I think also, I don't know how it's going to play out, but of course Australia will be doing a lot for export, same with Middle East, because the domestic market, there's fewer people that live in India or in China. I think India will be for domestic use and exports. China is focusing primarily now on domestic first, really making sure that they can replace coal with renewables for the internal market. And then later on, I'm sure they will also look for the potential for export. But the approach by the different countries is different. And the Middle East traditionally has been exporting fossil feedstock-based products. They also are blessed with a lot of renewables, so they will export both.
And sir, who all are your competitors in green hydrogen and methanol?
So when you look at methanol, we are number one in the world. So, and already for a very long time. So we have most of the largest number of plants in capacity in methanol. Also the largest plants being built around the world. They're based on Johnson Matthey technology. We're also number one in hydrogen. And together with our partners Uhde, we also have a very good position in ammonia, for example. But also in the other areas, we have very good positions. In the green hydrogen, we work a little bit differently in the sense that we don't build electrolyzers or fuel cell stacks. That's what our customers do. But what we do is we make the components. So the catalysts and catalyst-coated membranes, and we make them at the size that our customers need, and they will build then the membrane electrode assemblies typically and put them into stacks. So that's a bit different when you look at blue hydrogen, methanol and what have you. We do the whole engineering and make sure that we have the P&ID of the entire plant ready for our customers to go to an EPC and have it then constructed.